Hello, cs220. Welcome to Lecture 5, Variables and Expressions. I taught 200 a couple years back, so I was kind of like reliving my past there for a second. We're going to talk in this lecture about variables and expressions in Python and make sure that you understand what they're used for and what the rules are for making them. Before we do that, I thought it would be nice to have a quick review of operator precedence. This was one of the learning objectives from our last lecture session. On the left-hand side here, we have different kinds of operators with examples of them. We're going to try to put them in order. I'd like you to pause the video for a moment and see if you know what comes first and second and third and so on. Okay, let's see if you got that right. So first is going to be exponents. That's right, we evaluate exponents first. And remember, star is the operator that we use in Python for exponents. Next, we should evaluate signs. Even though you see a plus sign here in front of the variable x, we don't normally do that. It is allowed to do that, but you will often see just a single negative sign in front of a variable that stands for the opposite value. Next comes multiply and divide. Remember, we talked about different kinds of dividing, like integer division with / and modular remainder from division with that % sign. Next comes adding and subtracting. And remember, multiplying and dividing and adding and subtracting are evaluated from left to right. After that, we might have an expression with all these things combined. And so we would do all those arithmetic operators first, and then look for comparison operators and evaluate those. Inside comparison operators, we might see not statements, or and statements, or statements, and we evaluate them in that order. So in particular, you might be thinking, gosh, what would be happening in this expression, 10 minus -2 / 3? Well, first, we would probably evaluate that negative sign in front of the 2. And it's kind of amazing that Python can figure out where that is, but it does have its own ways of doing that and evaluating that answer. And so then it would evaluate the // and then it would evaluate the subtraction. If I have some complicated expression like this, we can use the order of operations to evaluate this as well. Take a moment and think about how you might evaluate this. First, we would do exponents. I see one here, I see one here. We do them from, well, we would group them by the base and the exponent. And then I would do this one, base and exponents. I don't see any negative signs, so I wouldn't worry about that. I don't see multiplying or dividing, so I wouldn't worry about that. I see adding here, so we'd worry about that next. And I see comparison operators next. I see equals, equals, and I see greater than, so we would do that next. And then we would do not or and, not and or, and I see an or here. I'm going to let you try that out for yourself, and you can put that into a Python interpreter, such as Jupyter Notebook, and see what the result is. Maybe we'll do that later on in our demo. That was meant to be a quick warm-up. Let's talk briefly about expressions, variables, and assignment statements. So we're going to see more of this in a demonstration, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background. So expressions are just what you expect them to be from mathematics. They're a mix of operators and operands. To add on to what you know from mathematics, they may include comparison operators. They may include logical operators. These are all examples of expressions. In an expression, there are operators and there are operands. So operators are those things that we just saw in that review exercise, right? So that would be like the plus, the star, the greater than, the or, the equals. Those are operators. That means that the operands are the other values. Technically, I'm not sure that I would call parentheses an operator. It's not exactly an operand. It's kind of something in between. We don't have to just use literal values like 5 or 3 or true to create expressions. We can create expressions with variables, and that's kind of going to be the big idea in this lecture. Take a quick test and see if you can figure out which are the literals in these 6 examples, pause the video and check and see if you can figure those out. I'll give you a hint. I think there's 3 of them. So one of them is the 0, one of them is the value true, one of them is the string goodbye. A string inside of quotes is considered a literal value. So now that you know what a literal value is, the other ones must be variables. We can take values and put them into variables. We do that with something called an assignment statement. An assignment statement will assign a value to a variable, and the value could come from a literal or from an expression. So for instance, given those expressions that you see there that I just moved over, we could use a single equal sign to assign the value from computing that expression, the result of that expression, and then store that in variables. So we kind of do this from right to left. We evaluate the right-hand side, we use an assignment statement, and then we store it in a variable. At least that's how it's interpreted by the Python interpreter. Again, the right-hand side can be any kind of expression. The single equal sign is the assignment operator. By the way, it sometimes is confusing because a single equal sign in a programming language means something different than an equal sign in mathematics. An equal sign in mathematics is saying that something is always true the way it's written, whereas in computer science, we're taking some value and storing it somewhere in the state of our machine. That thing that we're storing it in is called a variable. So next what I want to do is stop this video and make another video to show you some examples of assigning values to variables in Jupyter Notebooks.